9. You're listening to ABC Capricornia. Well, in the lead up to the state election, One Nation's candidate for Keppel, James Ashby, has been named as the party's Queensland leader. Mr. Ashby's worked for One Nation since 2015, first as a media advisor and later as Chief of Staff for Pauline Hanson. It's Mr. Ashby's first time running for state politics in the Central Queensland electorate. Good morning, Mr. Ashby. What does this role mean for you?
Morning, Jeremy. Look, it's a big step up, and obviously there's a great deal of honour in taking on the role that Pauline Hanson's put on me. But I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that I've spent most of my life now, consider the fact that I'm 45 and spent most of my life living in regional Queensland. May have grown up on the Sunshine Coast, but from 17 I moved out to Roma and then to Rocky and further north to Townsville and managed to settle myself back down here a good 8 years ago. So, yeah, look, it's about representing regional Queensland as much as the whole state. And we're in a situation come this state election where it may lead to a hung parliament or minority government. The Liberal National Party have still got to win 14 seats in their own right to have government. And if they can't do that, they're going to have to rely on other conservative parties like One Nation to be able to form government. So that's where it's important to have a leader within the minor party ranks. And I'm happy to take that job on. But nonetheless, I've still got to win my seat here in Keppel as well.
And so you mentioned that is quite a bit of power that you could have then coming in where if there are a few seats there, you could hold the balance of power. What would that role look like then as the leader of One Nation in Queensland?
Well, fortunately, I've been in a Chief of Staff role to Pauline Hanson over a time where we as One Nation spent 2 terms of the federal parliament with that control. And the ability for a minor party like us to be able to shape legislation in that position is quite a strong position. But it's also one of responsibility because you're making decisions not just for Queensland, but on a federal level, we were making decisions for the whole country. So in this scenario here, if it was a minority government that the LNP held in Queensland, it's not just about looking out for the best interests of Keppel and Central Queensland. It's about ensuring the whole of the state is looked after in a new term of government. And that's a big responsibility because it is about being across every piece of legislation. At the end of the day, no legislation passes without the crossbench having their say on it. So it is an important role. And as I say, having lived in regional Queensland for more than half of my life, I think it's important we start to get our fair share of funding in parts like CQ and in particular here in Keppel.
You mentioned as well living in regional Australia and in Keppel too. How long have you had your eyes on the seat of Keppel for?
Jeremy, it was something that Pauline had discussed with me a couple of years ago, the idea of running for a state seat. Not having worked in state parliament, I do find that obviously the big game is the federal, but what we discovered during COVID was that the state played a very instrumental role over the control of borders and certainly made a lot of crucial decisions at that time. And it's what really opened my eyes to the benefit of having One Nation in Queensland. There were plenty of decisions made at that time that we wouldn't have agreed with if we did have stronger representation in the Queensland Parliament at that time. So, yeah, look, it has been a couple of years that I've had my eye on Keppel. It's not the easiest of seats to win. It's, with a margin that has deteriorated over time here for Labor. I certainly am aware of the fact that it is winnable. I believe One Nation will win Keppel, and I believe that we can make some instrumental changes, positive changes, not just for this area but for the state as well.
You've previously worked for the LNP, and going in, as you mentioned there, if you hold the balance of power, you have to work with different parties. How do you feel about that?
I'll correct you there. I've never worked for the LNP.
Oh, my apologies, James, sorry.
No, I was a member of the LNP some years ago, but I've never worked for them. Look, the relationship with other Conservative parties is important. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them all the time. And I think that's one of the most critical things to remember, is that by having more or less a different view, but also considering we are conservative, it makes it a whole lot easier to work with a conservative government. And the LNP are mostly conservative. There are things that I don't agree with them. I don't agree with their decision to back the treaty legislation. I don't agree with the fact that they've legislated the net zero policies here in Queensland. I don't agree that they've backed the 50-cent fares and the spending of royalties from our region across Queensland. And I also don't agree with the fact that they backed Labor's budget more recently. So they're things that I would certainly have more of a say on if I was elected here in Keppel. And I think that also it would send a clear message to an LNP government that you won't get away with the left ideological policies that some of the members down in the southeast corner have been driving. The Liberal National Party, in a lot of ways, the Nats are dead here in Queensland on a state level. They don't exist. It is purely a Liberal Party and Liberal National Party by name only. And there'd be a lot of your listeners that would be nodding their heads right now going, yeah, they've lost their way in so many different characteristics. So I think that having One Nation there, and if we did have that power or balance of power, we can pull the Liberal National Party back more to a centre-right party rather than this centre-left.
This week, we've been taking a look at the state of local roads. This is what a few people have had to say.
Definitely the Bruce Highway. Yeah, I think that's disgraceful. I don't know how many people have to die on the road before they take that seriously and fix it up.
Sometimes they can be quite hazardous. Just recently after the rain on the Yeppoon Road, there was lots of potholes and people did tyres and stuff after that. So that's quite concerning.
I think that living on the coast, there's quite a few roads that are a bit hazardous and a bit dangerous to drive on in parts, yeah. Well, I drive from Emu Park to Yeppoon quite regularly, and the coast road, we're all frequently complaining about how narrow and rough it is driving that road, yeah.
You're part of the woods there down by the coast. Mr. Ashby, is there a road that comes to mind to you that you think needs the most amount of attention?
Well, the mere fact that the Bruce Highway is closed at least one day a week lately, it's a sure sign that we've got to make sure that Bruce Highway is adequately funded so that we can not only keep up with the maintenance of it, but it should have been a bipartisan agreement from all sides of politics that we start duplicating it from both ends. I think 50 kilometres each end a year, do that over the next 20 years, and we'll have safer roads. It'll certainly be done between, in your lifetime and mine. I know that it's a long process, but at the end of the day, unless we forge a plan now, we're going to be left with this same old story for the next 20, 30 years where our roads are not keeping up. And sure, the Emu Park to Rocky Road, it's a frustrating road because there's very few opportunities to overtake on it. A lot of people do mosey on down that road, sometimes at 80 k's when they should be travelling at 100. And this is where the dangers present themselves because people get frustrated. We've got a lot of more modern cars on the roads today. I know myself, I'm driving one at the moment that's got that lane assist on it, and it quite literally can't navigate some of these dodgy roads that people are driving on. It wants to pull you back inside the lane if you try and overtake a push bike.
Very relatable.
Yeah, these are issues that I think that the state government and federal government need to recognise because as technology gets better in our cars, we're heavily reliant on having good roads that are not just safe and suitable to drive on, but roads that'll remain open. And I've got a caravan, Jeremy, and that Leichhardt Highway is terrible. The beef roads, you wouldn't even take a caravan on. It'll break axles and cause you all types of grief. So people drive these roads every single day. And I think for a lot of the politicians, the majority of them are down in the southeast corner. They don't drive on these roads as regularly as you and I would, and most of your listeners would. And I think there needs to be a big wake-up call. There needs to be better representation from the bush and the regional parts of this state. And we get our fair share of taxes spent back in this area because they're collecting a stack of cash from our royalties that are delivered here in central Queensland but siphoned all the way back down to Brisbane. We don't see them back up here.
Well, Mr. Ashby, big thanks for joining us this morning.
No, thanks for your time. Thanks, Jeremy.
James Ashby joining us there, the One Nation candidate for Keppel and also the party's Queensland leader. It is 12 to